Can we continue, please?
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I don't know if I should pull this closer, but yeah. Okay. All right. So, obviously, we looked at a lot of different things with the infrastructure. One of the components we had to consider was our enrollment analysis and our projections and our capacity numbers as far as the school buildings go and so on. If you look, sorry. If you look at the chart on that first page, that chart is one that we had given you earlier when we were, when I say earlier, I mean like earlier in the year, around March, maybe even February. That was the early projections that we had come up with between our internal data is us, then below it is Stanford, Middle Cities, and then obviously Plant Moran on the bottom. So the 21,321 number is where we were hoping to be, or thinking we would be. That number didn't come to fruition. Our projections changed, of course, with our community being as transient as it is with many of our schools. So if you look at our original long-term, that was that 21,321 number, then in April, we get more accurate projections. That's when we kind of figure out who's coming back, who's not coming back, as far as our student population goes. Some students who may be leaving overseas and that type of thing as well. So we came back with a projection of 21,034. The number of enrolled students as of October 4th was 21,022. So it's pretty close to that number. However, what we do on count day, we get money, we get budgeted based on how many students show up actually. So those are our active students. Our active students on 10/4 was 20,751. That was on count day. Since count day, we've increased enrollment, by almost almost 50 students, more than 50 students actually. So we're enrolling students every day. Some students that were overseas or whatever are now finally coming back to school and so on. So a fourth high school or new ninth grade academy, one of the things about that is, I'm sure you've already discussed to some extent, is it's problematic both financially and obviously sustaining enrollment. So when we look at, enrollment being a certain number, you have to maintain a certain number anytime you open a new school. So that's one of the issues we have with that. Enrollment over the last 5 years in the district, you see that in the winter we increase enrollment. By the time the second semester begins and our second con day, which is February, enrollment always increases. Usually it's by about 140. So we'll see how this year goes. If we do get that 140, then we're still going to be under that 21,000 number that we had originally anticipated. Now, those are the numbers over the past 5 years. Another thing that we were asked to look at was the enrollment numbers in the East and the West, and in our elementary schools specifically. So we did that. Fall 2014, you see our enrollment in our kindergarten seems to be increasing. Part of the reason, in my opinion, is it's increasing is because of the Young Fives program. So when we start students earlier in our schools, the likelihood of them remaining in our schools is greater. So that's part of that, and obviously, population changing as well. Enrollment building numbers, you have 11 East Side schools. Their enrollment is about 5,600, and we have 10 West Side schools, and their enrollment is a little more than 3,200. So you see where the majority of our student population resides. I also included middle school numbers. Again, East Side schools, there's 4 of those. So you have Salina Intermediate, Eunice, Laurie, and Woodworth. And that comprises 2,600 students. And then your 3 West Side schools, Smith, Bryant, and Stout, are 2,240. But half of Stout's population is actually East Side students who are being bused over to Stout. That's about 440 students from that number that are really students that reside in the east side of the city but go to a West Side school. STEM is not included because obviously, as you know, STEM gets students from all over the city, from the east and the west, so I didn't think it was relevant for that. And that's pretty much it.
Yes.
With the enrollment numbers that you shared with us, drop, where are we seeing the drop? High school, middle school, elementary, east, west? where's it kind of coming from?
It was Miller was under projections, Etzel Ford was under projections, Smith was a little bit under, but they've kind of caught up. Overall, it was probably the high school had the most impact as far as enrollment number. Elementary was pretty solid across the board.
One thing I've heard is that a lot of the charter schools do everything they can to keep the kids through count day, and then if they don't want the kids, then they come back over to us.
That is correct.
You think that's why we usually see higher numbers in the winter term?
Yeah, that's definitely why we see higher numbers in the winter, without question. That's the main reason that we see higher numbers. And sometimes people think that the charter schools might be better, so they enroll in the charter schools. They're not getting exactly what they want out of there, so they come, to our schools after that.
Okay.
There is a small function of the 25E, so when they actually start and get counted in the charter schools, that we get a prorated amount for that FTE if they come back to us before the winter count. So we do get a partial of that money, but not the full FTE.
So it's not based on the 90-10?
It is based on the 90-10, but there's a transition cost because the statewide has been seeing that. And so there's a transition cost where part of that funding will then come to us from the other school.
Okay.
Trustee Barry?
Trustee Thorpe was reading my mind, that 140 that were down. And I completely respect what the committee's recommendation came in. But for you to say that a fourth high school is not an option because sustaining enrollment is problematic and it's 140 that we're down now and we're predicting, those numbers are throughout the district. You just said that, right?
Yes,
So
these numbers are district numbers.
140, we're down at Etzel Ford, 20, 30, 40 students.
About 50 students at Etzel
Yeah,
Ford.
so I don't think 50 students, when we were talking, this is not questioning you.
No, you're fine.
Did I hear?
Yeah.
When we were talking about, the capacity issues we had last year, I think it was a lot more than just 50 students that we were dealing with, that high schools were over capacity.
Oh, no question.
Yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Trustee Thorpe?
I'll add one more piece then. If we're seeing increasing enrollment in the kindergartens, how are we doing at capacity with all of our elementary schools? If we assume that that's going to keep happening for a few more years.
I mean, if it continues to grow and grow and grow, then yes, we'd have to look at capacity there. But right now, our buildings, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, can sustain, a few more students at the elementary level.
Across the board, yes. If it got to be concentrated, like more
Right.
continuously on the east side, then that might be an issue. As part of the discussions for the capacity aspect, we did talk about programs moving. One of the discussions that came up was the Michael Berry Center, how we have house special ed there, we have our STEM program, we have adult ed classes. As part of the capacity discussion, it did come up of possibly moving those schools to other parts of the district, and maybe even building additions onto other schools to house a special education so they can still interact with elementary. Those are the kind of discussions that are happening now, but we really didn't go further down that road until we really get a directive from the board of what direction the board really wanted to consider.
But if we go down, if we go that direction, obviously it's going to require more busing.
Correct. And that's part of the discussion.
That's a huge issue in our, I'm looking at the numbers here, I don't like to refer to east-west, but I know you just have to sometimes. But yeah, that's where the population is, on the east side.
Right.
And we all preach that, hey, Dearborn's all about neighborhood schools, but we're busing 50% of the students to Stout, so
Right.
to keep that on our back burner too.
So now we're transitioning to the board discussion, so the board can kind of go. Please remember the outcomes that we stated back at the beginning of the agenda of what we're trying to accomplish. So when you come to the November 12th meeting, you give direction to administration of what direction you want to go with this long-term plan.
So it's time for board discussion?
Correct. And we have a lot of administrators in the audience, so if you have a question about busing, Mark's here. If you have, we have high school principals here, so if anywhere you want to go with the discussion, we can bring somebody up.
Can I make 2 points too? Thank you, appreciate it. We also have Dr. Tynan who's here and Miss Ali Bazzi. One of the things that we had planned to do was to get input from the principals at actually a meeting. Well, because of the substitute situation that occurred, we canceled all those meetings and kept people in the buildings. So instead, we did get the information electronically from all the principals, and Ms. Ali Bazzi just shared that with you. As far as it was actually discussed here to get the input from the principals in the school, or all the administrators. So we just wanted to get their input. First of all, on the district, which was similar to this. Secondly, it was going to be what we're going to be doing at the next general administrators meeting, and we're actually shortening that meeting because of the substitute situation. We're going to start it a little later, and it's going to end earlier than normal. We're going to have some discussion where they can start brainstorming or having a discussion about their specific buildings. Mind you, they've already been doing that though with Mr. Brzezinski and Mr. Wall's department, Mr. Rangels, because they had that whole list where they compiled information. And I don't know, Dr. Tynan, if you want, but I know that you would get information and you would send it in. So I don't know if you had anything to comment just on the overall.
Just read my mind.
But I just wanted to let the board know that Ms. Mason just shared that document.
Do you want me to summarize real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so I just sent this to you in email, but we asked the administrators to take the survey. 81 responded, and the first question asked them to rank the 4 areas in the order of importance, one being the most important for infrastructure, safety and security, capacity, and air conditioning. It was almost a very close tie for infrastructure, and safety and security tied for first, and capacity was second, air conditioning was third, or last, least favorable. The second question was select your preferred funding option. The 3 options were the tax neutral, the 0.5 mil tax increase, and then the 1 mil tax increase. 40.7% of administrators voted for tax neutral. 35.8% voted for 1 million tax increase, and then 23.5% voted for a 1 mil tax increase. And then the last question was select your preferred method. You'll get all the options when I tell you the percentages. So 67.9% voted for additions and or renovations to existing buildings aligned to the curriculum and instructional needs. 23.5% voted for construction of a 4th high school, and 8.6% voted for separate building for 9th grade Fordson students, commonly referred to as a 9th grade academy.
So where are we? Board discussion.
Board discussion. Anybody have any discussion? Trustee Pepitchko?
Okay, a couple things. One, on November 12th, the direction you're looking for from us at that point, are you looking for strictly, are we moving forward with a bond proposal?
Correct. We would look at some sort of recommendation to administration to go forward with the 4 outcomes. Is it a bond issue that you want to go forward with? What kind of dollar value? So we have a scope, your priorities, if they're differently than what you've heard today, and then making sure that the end timeline is the November election. So those kind of outcomes we're looking at.
Okay, so here's my question for discussion. Oh, is it a game on?
It was a bus video, wasn't it?
When we talk about, we know, we have a pretty good idea about what our infrastructure needs are at the buildings and the dollar value, kind of generally about them. And I'm assuming we would prioritize out of the funding we would get from the bonds as to what we would concentrate on, infrastructure-wise. But we're also supposed to generate, and I looked at the kind of breakdown that was given to us, about how much would go towards infrastructure and how much we would dedicate towards the capacity issue of what we would do for a solution for that. Now, most of that capacity issue seemed to be concentrating at the high school level at this point, but we're also looking at a potential down the road. This bond is a 20-year bond. If we're going to concentrate only at the high school level and we end up with issues at the elementary level, especially on the east end, or have it percolate up to the middle school level, our funding isn't going to necessarily be available to address as much of that if we sunk it all into the high school capacity solutions, whatever we determine that we're going to do with it. Are you asking for those kinds of decisions to be made as well in November?
Well, administration hasn't gone down the path of actually designing it. We still have to have discussions with the principals at all the buildings and a lot of the community groups. That's going to be part of our informational gathering process. Just remember, we also have the enhancement fund and our annual transfer to the building and site fund to do some of those smaller projects.
Right.
So if we're trying to do just an addition onto a building, that's something we can handle potentially internally. And like we did with the football fields back in 2007, we did not bond for that. We did a non-voter approved bond to generate the money all at once, and we pay it back with our proceeds from the general fund. So we can look at some of those things to help address those smaller issues. When you talk about infrastructure, you're talking $120 million of infrastructure needs. That's not something you can do on a year-to-year basis because it would take too long to address it all. So those are the things that were the bond issue. We're trying to understand with the big ticket items. Infrastructure was roughly about 120 million. Air conditioning was 50. Safety and security is around 15. And the capacity issue is really the wild card, depending on how we want to address it. And that's where that's
the part that I'm looking at. That's the part that really is the question mark.
Right, so that's where we need to sit down with APE's department and look at projections. We need to sit down with the high school principals and look at the instructional values of what we're trying to accomplish and how does that all fit together.
But
and
you're
so
not looking for that from us on
No,
November
we're not looking
12th.
for you to get into the weeds and actually understand all the this building, that building.
Right.
At this point, we just want to make sure the board, we have support from the board to move forward with starting to design that plan.
Okay, all
And
right.
similar like we did with the capacity, we'd come back every meeting, kind of as just a discussion at the end of the meeting, kind of give you an update where we are and what progress we have.
I just want to make sure we're all clear as to what kind of question you're going to be asking
Right.
us in November. Okay.
Tom, what's the filing deadline that you need to know by?
Trustee Lane? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no,
Mason?
I was trying to just ask Tom. Did you just want to reiterate the filing deadline? Because even though it's the November election, what's the absolute deadline that we would need to know so we can
So
get on the
as we
ballot?
look at the calendar base, as a general outline, we did work with some of the professionals to get it outlined. We normally would go through a qualified bond status where we get to use the state bond rating, which is much better than a school district just because of their size and their value of resources that come into them. We would have to look at that going to the state for approval by the end of April, May. And the deadline for calling a November election would be sometime in June. So that means the administration would have to put together a plan by sometime in March that we can actually submit to the state for them to review it and actually report back out by April or May.
So that's the timeline.
Correct.
So November is the.
If for a November
deadline
election,
for
correct.
the board to approve, to give you some recommendation.
So we would actually have to start working on that obviously relatively soon to kind of get that all in place. Because there's a lot of meetings that have to happen with, again, as the constituents, so the staff, to kind of develop that plan. Because, no one person has all the answers. It has to be kind of a consensus on the administrative side of how to go forward.
So you're picking November. What if it happened in December?
Well, you're only allowed to have elections in certain time frames.
No, I mean, our vote, the board's vote.
Oh, the
You're
board's
asking
vote?
For the board's vote in November?
No, what would happen is
Direction.
the direction comes from November of what you want the board to do. Give direction to the administration to actually go for a bond, develop a bond program with a tentative time frame. You can always change your mind later. And then we would actually start putting the plan together and obviously update the board along the way. Sometime in probably February or March, we would come to the board and saying, this is our plan. And then you can tweak it at that point, and eventually you would say, then submit it to the state for review.
All right, but November is when you want this.
A tentative direction, yes.
Yeah. Okay, yes, Trustee Lane.
Oh, I think we should caution people, since there were a couple of programs that were mentioned, like the special ed program at Michael Berry Center. I hate to have a tidal wave triggered of people getting worried about
Right.
something. And nothing moves quickly
No.
here. It's like turning around the Titanic, We're not making any decisions about those programs. So I don't think anybody should be saying, oh my gosh, they're going to move our program. We just moved programs around. So we don't do that incautiously. It's a big decision. And the more feedback, I mean, we've all been talking about how appreciative we are for the committee to have given us the feedback. The more feedback, the better. It's all of our decision. We just are tasked with the final vote on it. But Dr. Maleko, any feedback or that we can get through the web or beyond even the administrators, I'd like to have as much feedback as we can from citizens. So that's a good thing. My own, I'm a little bit cautious about using the feedback from people who are recommending that we pass a mill, but they might not live in the area where the mill is going to be passed, if you get my drift. It's a lot harder to recommend your own tax increase than someone else's tax increase. So, but I'd like to say that I'm very grateful that we have the flexibility for our district that the college presents for us. So many of the programs being able to be cited at the college is really a gift to this district. Without that being a great flex option, we'd be in a lot different situation. Building a high school is exorbitantly expensive these days. Building a tiny little elementary is expensive. We don't do anything. You can hardly put in an elevator in a building for less than $500,000. So nothing gets built easily or at low cost. We have to think carefully through it all. I know we all will. I just don't want anybody to start saying, well, they're going to move our program. No, nothing's happening yet.
Trustee Thorpe?
So, echoing what Trustee Petlichkov was talking about, when we're talking about the bond and roughly X amount goes towards infrastructure and so much to capacity. So, say with capacity, how much flexibility do we have if we originally are thinking it's going to go one direction to go to a different one that's still capacity, but the needs have changed?
As part of the bond language is developed by legal counsel based upon the plan. They try to keep it as broad as possible, as long as you stay within the confines of what the voters approved. If you, for example, approve to an addition onto a building, the state's not going to require if you put the addition on one building or the other, as long as you put on an addition. So there is some flexibility as part of the bond process as things change, that you can make a decision to move it from one building to another.
So it could just say additional classrooms.
Correct.
To be constructed, but
Right.
not where.
Correct.
So, Trustee Barry?
Just to go back to what Trustee Petchikoff was talking about, the potential issues at the elementary level down the road. Yeah, we have a building approaching 1,000 students at the elementary level, 850, 900. I mean, some of those issues on the east side, quote unquote, they already exist. What I wanted to bring up, Tom, is I think we really need to look into this. Dr. Mead asked for the timeline. I thought this was going to be part of the presentation, so I held back a little bit here, but we need to go back to that. If there's no other ballot issue, I'm assuming we might be at maybe mid-teens, maybe 15–16% turnout, and we know a big portion of that come out without calling out any certain community or the conservative community, and that's going to be probably close to 45 to 50% looking at numbers. So I'm kind of concerned about that. If we're going to do all this work to put it out, A, it's a small sample of our taxpayers that's going to be voting if there's no other issues, and B, the ones that are going to come out and vote, I'm kind of very concerned on that. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's something we might have to look into.
If we found that there weren't many or any other issues that were going to be on the ballot, what about the idea of delaying for another year when we've got a bigger ballot in 2020? I know it pushes everything down the road, but it could reduce our cost. And it increases voter turnout then, potentially.
I'm not an expert on the market per se, so that's something we can have it considered. Obviously, the interest rates are going to obviously rise from current expectations. And there is the cost of inflation on construction that was discussed at the infrastructure task force, that the longer you wait, the more costly it's going to cost, so you get less construction out of it. But those are the things that we can take into consideration, yes.
Well, I would also say, generally speaking, especially when you're doing an initiative like this, you want to have a couple shots at it so that if the first go-around does fail, you have another opportunity before it all expires. And I would assume that if we were to do it more than once, you know, we might have a different turnout in 2020 than we might have in 2019, and be able to explore how we can better sell the product if it isn't successful in 2019. I think, what is it, maybe $20,000 to have an election? Yeah, somewhere around there.
Between 20 and 30.
Yeah, you know, it is a cost. Generally, we do always have something every year, but I'm not certain if there is anything else going to be on the ballot that I can think of for 2019. But we just want to kind of, this bond expires. What we're trying to do is...
Correct. At some point, depending on taxable values, our current 4.82 mills will start to decline.
Right.
Because by law, we're only required to levy enough mills to make the payments of the bonds and up to 1 year's worth of payments in reserve. So depending on how that flows, that potentially that 4.82 might drop to 4.6 or 4.7. At that point, then the actual funding capacity of keeping a no mill increase will reduce.
And what year will that be?
Well, it's going to be getting every year forward. All depends on the taxable values.
Okay.
You know, the taxable values go up higher than expected, then that number might reduce quicker. If it actually goes down, then that might make it longer. We don't usually find the taxable values in Wayne County until about April or May timeframe.
Okay.
Trustee Barry?
Was this ever discussed at the administration level, that, you know, why didn't we start talking about this a couple of years ago?
Well, we started the process back when we did the refunding in 2017. Until that market transaction concluded, that kind of gave us an idea of being able to reduce our interest costs that we're charging for our current debt. After that point, that's when the discussion started, because after we knew that we actually reduced it by about $5 million, that's what we saved the taxpayers in future interest costs. That created the now ability to actually go out and bond for this money.
Anybody else? Help me with the meeting in November. Is this, again, a discussion and just kind of an agreement among board members about what direction we go, or is this a motion?
Yeah, typically when we have a workshop, we don't make decisions. Basically, it's make sure you have all the information to have a consensus at the next meeting. So just similar like we did for both the Dearborn High School, you gave the board a direction to move forward with the classroom addition at Dearborn High School. It's not necessarily a formal motion, but a consensus by the board to give direction to administration.
So it's a consensus item?
Correct.
Okay, in November.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just want to mention too, that if the board does give us direction to pursue this, and I know Mr. Wall's been talking, you know, timelines, he's got his budget and he plans well in advance, and like you said, a couple years ago with the bonding, we knew some of that ability that would come up in 2019, and I know we saved too by doing it jointly with the college. But if the board does give direction, then that's when there's going to be multiple meetings that will occur. That's when, and this is what happened in the last one, where the administration from the buildings, at that time it was Mr. Burek. There were multiple meetings with them coming in and looking at the list that Mr. Grzinski put together. There would also be, you know, the community meetings and things that we would go out. So what we would have to do then is to come up with that specific plan. So although the committee, you know, they may have brainstormed and mentioned a building here and there as they're brainstorming, but that wasn't really the task of the committee. It was the recommendations that came forward. So then what we would have to do as our team, knowing the infrastructure of those buildings, is we would have to come up with, you know, recommendations for the board to look at both the infrastructure and the, you know, the capacity issues, which we've been talking about, and that team has been together. So we'll have to come up with more specificity, you know, with some ideas of what we can do to alleviate that capacity.
So is the direction basically the board would indicate they go for a bond issue? Is that mainly?
There actually is no action formally taking. The board wouldn't decide if a bond was actually the final result until sometime in March. Because the board would have to see the plan the administration put together before any formal action is taken.
So what is the board going to be recommending in November?
So on November 12th, we're asking the board, as a consensus, to give direction for the board, the administration to move forward and design a bond plan.
Okay.
No action would actually be taken until March.
So we're not going to be deciding of these four things.
Correct.
Which is a priority. We're just talking about whether to advise you to go look into
Right.
a
Well,
bond issue.
because the actual, if we wanted to do all four of those categories, it'd be well over the $207 million bond we're talking about today.
But
So if
we're not prioritizing.
no. But if the board says we want to include air conditioning as part of that bond to expedite our plan right now is to just look at a single room in each of the elementaries. If you wanted to go further than that, then that's the stuff we need to know, because that reduces the amount of money we have to design the plan. Okay. So that's why we're trying to figure out where the priorities at the board level, so administration can't design a plan doing all infrastructure and capacity, not addressing safety and security and air conditioning. So that's where we need the input of the board. So before we spend all this time designing a plan, make sure we have your input of what you think is important and should be included.
So basically, you are going to be prioritizing.
But at a very broad level, not
Yeah,
necessarily
right.
designing by building or anything, but just at a very broad level.
But we're limited to the four different categories.
You're unlimited.
Well, we're not limited, but if you want to change
No,
track,
I don't, but, yeah. Yes.
I would just say that those recommendations are helpful to us, obviously. So if the board did give us direction based on the priorities set by the infrastructure committee, then that will help us to go and design it. If the boards were to say no, that priority, and again, I know the committee did a great job, but they also knew along the way it was recommendations. So if there was something, and I know we don't have to necessarily decide everything, but it would be helpful to the administration so that, if the board is generally aligned with the recommendations of that just were presented today, then that is important information for us so that we can go and be more specific in our design based on those recommendations. If like, for example, if one of them said no, the board said no, number 3, we wanted this as a higher priority, then obviously we would have to look at some changes. But as it stands, if the board wanted to move forward, based on those recommendations, and that's how we would operate within our team.
so now is the time to have the conversation. Yeah. Are you happy with the recommendations that were made? Are they sound? Are they something that you think is what you want to move forward with? Or are you saying, hey, no, throw caution to the wind, I want to go in this direction, and this is why, and make your case for it? Because in November they want us to say, hey, look, go ahead with the bond, make it tax neutral, and focus on these priorities.
Trustee Lane?
I'm trying to understand, but it's such an elephant to try to wrestle down all the numbers, and I've got 20 tabs open between all the different PowerPoints.
Yeah,
but Mr. Mashur, I remember looking back in time when we'd have incoming kindergartners versus outgoing seniors, when we'd see a big gap, and we knew we'd be graduating. We knew that group, the big group at the lower end, would be moving through the system. As I recall from Ms. Peterson last June, I think, we were having 1,500, 1,600 graduates. I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was around there. And when I'm looking now at the elementary numbers, we're 1,581 for incoming kindergartners, which tells us we're going to be pretty much stable as far as our population. Is that your thought? I know that I think most of us were surprised that we didn't see increases, but part of that I know is immigration.
Part of it is that,
Oh, it's the young fives also, so.
Yeah, the 1581 includes young fives and kindergartners. And then our senior number for this year is 1607, so it's 20 difference. So
and of the kindergartners, those young fives will attend kindergarten again, so they're actually
A year behind.
they're actually going to be in like year 13, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's confusing.
I don't know how
because
many
we have
young
the big
fives do we
blip
have?
in the ninth grade too.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Ninth grade numbers always are deceptive as well because of the students that don't quite qualify for sophomore standing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just again with our schools, with our populations, the competition is getting more and more fierce as far as competing for students. So
Are you talking about internally or with
no,
charters?
yeah, with
Other
charters, private
charters,
schools,
religious
etc. Yes, like Wise Academy, had a smaller enrollment. Now they finished construction, their enrollment has gone up a lot, so we lost a few kids to them. We're going to continue to lose kids, to some of the other charter schools that we have. But now we have charter schools that are coming from out of the area that are busing our students to their schools, which are 15, 20, sometimes even 30 minutes away. They come in and they convince the families that, hey, this is the way to go, and they take them and go from there.
One of the things, just a point of data, when the state looks at bonding, they make sure that you are in need of capacity, because as part of this, we were looking at adding additions potentially as part of the bond. The state looks at an 85% capacity rate. And so when they say if you're under 85% capacity rate, then you really don't need a bond for expanding. Right now, at the high school level alone, I did not do the calculation at the elementary, at the high school, we're about 500 kids over that 85% capacity.
Is the state looking at district-wide or individual buildings?
It depends on what the actual bond program we're submitting to the state to review. So if we're looking at secondary, because that's been a capacity issue as of right now, depending on where the enrollment goes, that if we're over 85% capacity, then they say you would have validation actually building an addition at the secondary level. So we're over 500 kids right now above what the 85% capacity. And that's where we're seeing at Dearborn High where they have teachers on carts. Because obviously you got to have growth to change programs at the high school level because kids choose different things every year. So you got to be able to have that functionality of that 50% space to actually move things around and make things work.
So Tom, what are you expecting the board to do tonight?
Tonight was just a discussion item. So just kind of update you on what the task force did. And as you kind of think forward and you ask the administration for additional data, maybe that we didn't provide today, that you have all the information you need to feel comfortable with your consensus on the November 12th direction.
Okay. Does anybody need any other discussion? Tonight, yes.
I don't know. I didn't get a chance to look at the City Relations Committee, but I was assuming that they may have looked at any new large building projects, if there are any.
No, the one that you had asked about, I was told was going to be more parking for cars for Ford Motor Company because it's a deed restricted piece of land. Although I drove by it today just to take a look, it looks like it could be something more than that, but I don't know. But that's what I was told by the director of their community and economic development, that's what he had heard that it was going to be. But he wasn't certain either, so, not everybody shares all their plans. So whether Ford Motor Company is doing something else at the Rotunda site is unknown. That I heard outside of the city relations. We actually at the city relations, one of the things we did discuss, and I know Dr. Ball was part of that conversation, because part of the infrastructure conversation is about campus safety, safety and security, and about a grant, I believe, that he's been applying for.
Right, that is the CAPS grant,
Yeah.
and that was 1.3 million, and we're supposed to know, I think, on November 1st. Tomorrow.
So that, so we have some other things in play to offset some of this. So whatever plans are made with the bond language, will probably, they have enough lead time to, include that. My bigger question is because we're bonding for the P12, but some of this conversation about capacity flows into the college. And while we have that authority of what happens on the college campus, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we have the capacity there to utilize it in the in the way that we're talking about for high school programs. So I guess that would be one of the questions that we would have to take up, because I know with any bond, it can't be something that we're using over at the college campus.
That is correct. It'd be up to something that
It would
you
have, right, so that's something that has to be taken into consideration, because if we're talking about needing 12 more classrooms or whatever, where are we gonna put them? We're not gonna be using the bond to put them over at the college.
Are we discussed out? Next item.
Item number 2 is citizen participation. Those persons who wish to speak concerning an agenda action item may do so at this time. Mr. Chair, I don't have any blue cards.
Okay, next item.
Are we gonna go into any more, I guess right here, there's 2 agendas I'm looking at. One says board commentary, conclusion of workshop. Are we done with that part? Because if not, then we're ready to adjourn, I believe.
I think we're ready to adjourn.
Anybody else?
Everybody comfortable? Any other? Yes,
Just one,
Superintendent?
one fact I wanted to bring up, just so everyone's aware. You know, so when you talk about the young fives and some other programs like early childhood, obviously then you need rooms. So, you know, whether it's the GSRP. So do we have rooms in the elementary? Yes, but then when you're adding programs, you have certain rooms that can be used for like English language development specialists, for interventions and things. You do have them, but they're also being used for effective interventions. The other one is special ed. The county is kind of changing how they're doing special ed. So a lot of the center-based programs and I met with Mr. Saley on this, and Mr. Leap has mentioned this, but they're going to start pushing back some of the center-based that is county-wide back to districts. So there's going to be a need, and that doesn't mean all of it. I'm not saying all of it, but some of the you know, the autism program and others. And you've probably seen Mr. Saley's put updates that, you know, he needed additional classrooms and things. So that's one thing to consider. And so what we also are looking for sometimes is, you know, and a lot of times, not just at Howe, but those rooms are put into whether it be Nowlin or Salina or other places. So that's just something to have, you know, as well, that seems to be an area that the county is leaning in. I don't see a tremendous number of additional classrooms, but it seems like it's consistent. I don't know, Abe, you can maybe speak to that, or Shannon, just that I know Dr. Chokel's not here, but that we've had to add some of those classrooms in the different schools the last couple of years as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the elementary level.
Yeah.
And we are still moving forward on plans for the Michael Berry Career Center for that addition, correct?
Yeah, those plans have been designed.
Yeah.
So we've actually incurred some architect costs to actually design that plan, but we have not moved forward with that depending on how this
Right.
infrastructure committee
Right.
results
But
came out.
we've gotten to that point.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody ready?
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned.